Okay, so a little bit about how this chat is going to work. So we're going to start by talking to Kelsey and just understanding what Candor is, why she decided to start the business, and we'll do a quick kind of walkthrough of the app. And after that, we'll come back, and I have a few questions for Kelsey, because this is actually the first time I'm meeting Kelsey, but I've heard a little bit about her story, and it's quite fascinating. And I think that many of the people here will be able to relate to some of the struggles she's gone through and some of the challenges she's had to overcome to get to where she is. So I have a few questions that I want to ask there. And then we're going to dive into the Bubble editor, and I'm going to kind of put Kelly on the spot as the developer, and we'll pick her brain about what some of the most challenging aspects of building this app was, just so we can all dive into the editor and nerd out on Bubble like we all like to do, presumably. So another thing I should mention before we get started is in the chat, you can see a comment from Kelly. We have something set up on Slido where you can ask questions. And so we'll do our best at the end of the call, or maybe during, we'll see. As you can tell, we're definitely winning this, but we'll do our best to answer all of your questions there. Just make sure to post them on Slido and we'll come back to them. So if that sounds good, Kelsey, why don't we come to you? And I guess I'm curious to know, just quickly before we look at the app, why don't you give us your elevator pitch of what Candor is and why you decided to start this business?
Totally. Yeah. Well, really quick on my background, I've been in early stage startups as kind of an early stage employee for about 7 years, and have found that my startup experience lands in one of two buckets. The first one is, joining a team of a bunch of A players. Everyone's challenging each other. The culture is amazing. 14-hour days fly by. The other bucket is joining a team where the culture doesn't quite click, and you don't really feel like you're in it with everyone there, and maybe you don't have a great manager relationship, and it just doesn't quite work. And after having both of these experiences, kind of reflected and was like, well, this is crazy. Why does this happen? How can we spend, as early stage startup employees, so much time and energy and just passion in what we're doing, and not really click with the culture? And how do we join a company and then not realize that that's going to be the case? And so after into the issue myself, decided that I really wanted to help other people figure out, who they were really going to be working with, kind of on a really authentic level that's hard to get in the first couple of interviews that you do with a company. Things like, what's someone's real communication style? Is this person going to give me good feedback? What have their past direct reports said? So started Candor about a year ago to kind of think through that problem and try to help people get the data that they need on, the people that they're going to be working with, since in my experience, that was kind of it was a major factor in whether I was happy at work.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So I have a lot of questions that I want to follow up with there, but Kelly, do you want to share your screen and we can just quickly take a look at the app that's live right now?
Okay. So this is Candor. This is it's not the index page. This is our marketing page, our Candor's marketing page. This is actually not built on Bubble, the marketing page. And I am certain there's many reasons for that. But so I did not build this. Tyler, who is a developer with Candor, built this lovely page. But the reason why I'm showing you this is because I want to show you how you log in. So we have configured LinkedIn OAuth, which I am not afraid to say is the worst. So you have to go through LinkedIn, and then it sort of takes you to this little landing page before you can kind of fully get into the app. So that's just something I'm sure we will talk about at some point in this conversation, LinkedIn, but that's kind of the flow as you get in. And then you're taken to your profile page. So on your profile page, you've got a bunch of stuff. You've got, your title. You can edit it if you want to. You can change, your details about your stuff, change your workplace, etc. Change your photo and all of that. But what you're probably going to notice first is this graph over here on the left. So the graph is an aggregate of people's feedback on you as a coworker. Okay, so I'll show you sort of how this works in a second, but essentially the way the app works is that people can fill out what's called a take, which is an 8-step sequence where you're asked questions about someone specific, and you provide feedback on them. And that's a lot of like selecting words and selecting sentences that match for them. And all of that stuff is tied to numbers, which then feeds into this graph, which was maybe the hardest technical thing I've ever done in my life. So we've got this graph here. If you notice, you have coworkers' takes, but then you also have your own take. So when you sign up, you're prompted to write a take for yourself, where you basically look at yourself and kind of talk about how you work, what your strengths are, what things you could improve on, et cetera. And those are also fed into this graph. And so you can see this person's graph, the profile that you're looking at, and then you can see how other people see them. So you can kind of see these two different things, which is really interesting when the graph is like totally off from how you see yourself versus how other people see you. So, so that's on the left. On the right here, you can see the more granular, or what do I want to say? Like a little bit more, they're open-ended questions. It's a little bit more nuanced, right? So this is a part of the same, it's pulling from the same data that the graph is pulling from, right? But you can see this is a little bit sort of, more nuanced, right? So you can read, this is Kelsey's take of me. Actually, I know that, even though I only know that because I know Kelsey, and I remember when she did this, but the takes are anonymous. So you don't actually know who has said these things about you, but you can tell that they're either your manager or someone who reported to you, and where it was that you worked with them. So this is a little bit from Kelsey's take of me, or from someone's take of me. You can see each one of these. And if you click through, you can see the entire take, right? So this is just one little snippet, but now this is your take page. So it's going to show you the strengths that Kelsey has selected for me. These are from an option set in Bubble, areas for growth, and then just sort of general like working style words that she's tagged for me. And then down here, you have your open-ended questions. Right, so I can hide this take. If I feel like it is not representative of me, I can actually hide it and no one will see it, but they will see that it exists, right? If I feel like it's inappropriate, if there's something in here that's like just not, shouldn't be there, I can flag it, and then the Candor team will take a look and determine whether it actually is inappropriate or not. Okay, so back to our profile page. Now you're gonna notice that I only have one take, right? But we can search for someone. I know Kelsey has several. So we're using Algolia for search. And let's go to Kelsey's profile. And you can see she's got 4 coworker takes, and you can scroll through and kind of see, like, if you're a managing or like a hiring manager, you might want to see, what's Kelsey really good at, right? I'm considering her for position. And so I can just read through what people have said her superpower is. Same for area improvement, right? And then advice for future coworkers. Now we've got these traits up here. We have taken the top 5 traits that people have selected for Kelsey. So if I click on one of these, I'm going to see all of the traits that people have selected for her, right? And then let's say I want to see, like, what did people say about her persistence or her confidence, right? So I click on these and I can see that all of these are the takes where people have selected that term. And then you click through and you can see the full take, right? Okay, so let's say that I want to write a take for someone. Now, Jacob, you were in here before. Did you actually set up a profile? Jacob?
I did, yes.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to leave a take for Jacob. Jacob is a good dude, according to Jacob. And he has sort of filled out a take, it looks like. You started to, but you didn't actually finish it, I think.
I'm nervous to see what I actually wrote, but yeah, let's
well, I don't think you really wrote much of anything. But you do think you're really authentic. So we'll see about that. So I'm going to write a take for Jacob. We've been working together for a while. I know quite a bit about him. That's not actually true. Jacob is fairly new to me, actually. But let's just pretend. So I'm going to write a take, and it takes me through this write a take flow, right? So this is a single page with sort of custom states on, what step you're on. I'm going to select a relationship. Let's see, I worked with Jacob closely, but I didn't report to him, right? We worked together at Bubble. We're both boot camp instructors. And let's say it was like 2 years ago. Okay, all right, so here we go. So next, and you go to the next, you're going to the next screen, right? So I'm gonna select traits that I think Jacob fits with Jacob, right? So let's just pretend I'm being very thoughtful about this. And then I can either remove them or I can reorder them with these little arrows here. Okay, got my 5 selected. Not sure why that's got a scroll bar there. That wasn't there when we launched. Okay, next. And these are weaknesses or areas for improvement, right? Select. And now we have some character traits. Okay, reorder, etc. And now comes the, am I very excited to work with Jacob again? Yes, he's amazing. But if I weren't very excited, then it would sort of tag him separately. And I'll show you sort of how this is going to work later, what this means, right? Okay, so at this point, I'm prompted to give like a little bit more information, right? Not just like tagging him with stuff. So I am just going to copy and paste some fake feedback. And then it's going to prompt you to sort of select some of the strengths that you had previously selected and sort of tag your open-ended stuff with, these little tags. Okay. There we go. And this is some improvement stuff. And now here's what people should know about Jacob. Okay, so we're done with the take. We are celebrated for that. And then we're going to click to take them there, right? So at this point, what's happening in the back end is a bunch of back end workflows that are calculating a bunch of stuff. And it does take a minute, actually. And so my hope is that I've been stalling long enough that it will actually show up on the profile page. Hey, it does. Look at us. Here we go. So this is my take that I just wrote of Jacob. I can click on it. I can view the full take. And here is all of that stuff that I have said about him. Okay, I think, Kelsey, what did I miss? Did I miss anything? I think that was it, isn't it?
The request, you can request takes on yourself.
I can request a take. Yeah. So let's go back to my profile. And let's say I am sort of preparing for an interview with a company and I want to send them my Candor profile so they can see how people, feel about working with me. I can request a take from someone else, right? So I'm going to request a take from my boyfriend because that's who I can think about at the moment. And, I just fill this out, right? It's going to send him an email. And he is going to get the email, come in, set up his own profile, write a take of me. And then, I have another take on my profile. So it sort of breeds this, like, you're asking people to use it. And then you're also, let's see if there's, right. So let's say that I want to make sure this is the right Jacob, right? I want to write a review of him, but maybe his last name is like Smith and I'm not quite sure. Now he hasn't connected his LinkedIn, but if he had, it would show up here. So actually let me see. Right. So if I see his LinkedIn thing and it just opens up LinkedIn and I'm like, okay, that's the right Kelsey. Got it. Your LinkedIn also, of course, is linked right here. I can share my profile. At this point, that's simply creating this is my profile link, right? So I can just copy that and send it to whoever. It's not a social sharing at this point. Yeah, I think that kind of does it. Oh, I didn't do this stuff. God, this was a lot. So no, I did. I showed you guys this stuff. yeah, viewing all of your takes and seeing your takes. So that's the app in general. That's, you know, a quick walkthrough. And now I think Jacob wants to take a look at the back end. Also, I'm going to drop again the link to Slido in here.
I just dropped it in there.
Oh, you did? Okay, cool. Great.
Yeah, so thanks for the, it's such a beautiful app. Like it's so pretty to look at. So it's like, I get excited every time. I wish I could design something this beautiful.
I want to plug, actually, I did not design this app. I just built it. But Felix is Candor's designer, Felix Lau, and he's incredible.
All right. Nice work, Felix. And nice work, Kelly, for implementing the designs. So there's quite a few technical questions coming in through Slido. We'll do our best to get to all of these. And like Kelly said, we're going to do a technical deep dive. There's a question about Algolia. I'm also curious to know about your experience with Algolia and also LinkedIn OAuth. There's tons of, I'm sure we could spend days talking about all this stuff, but we'll see where we get. I want to, while we are fortunate enough to have Kelsey here, pick Kelsey's brain a little bit before we get into the editor, because again, this is my first time meeting Kelsey, but I've heard a little bit about her story. And I think it's a fascinating one because Kelsey, and correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, but from what I understand, you started as many of us presumably did on Bubble, in the sense that you had an idea for an app. You said you started this a year ago, right?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, so you had an idea for an app. Did you have any sort of technical background before?
I took a coding class in college and literally like opened up the old textbook and was like, this is too hard. I'm going to try this Bubble thing.
Right. Okay. So you started building this app yourself on Bubble. And I guess what was that like for you learning Bubble and trying to build this idea out yourself in the early days? Like how long did it take you to feel like you learned Bubble?
Yeah, I mean, I was really learning piecemeal based on what I needed to build. So I started with just a Bubble template and like changed the copy and a couple of images and was like, a landing page, perfect. And started sending that out to people just to get their reactions. And in the template, there was a button, not that I created, but it said request access. And then all of a sudden there was people requesting access to this thing that did not exist. It was just a landing page. So very quickly I was like, oh gosh, okay, I actually need to build an app now. I don't know how to do that. So my first step actually was I tried to learn, got very frustrated very fast, and actually worked very like maybe 1 week, not even, with an Upwork Bubble developer who created kind of a one-page app for me. And basically like learned Bubble just by kind of going through his workflows from there. And then I built the rest of it kind of myself after that.
That's amazing. And so at some point you got it to a point where you went to investors and raised money, right? And at that point you ended up finding Kelly, which I'm curious about. But one question I have, I think one thing that's really challenging when you're building any sort of app or doing anything creative in general, for that matter, if you have a creative idea that you're pursuing, building a business definitely is that you often have this idea in your head of, well, you have this idea in your head of what you want this thing to be. And it's this perfect ideal that's nice and shiny and perfect that lives in your head. And then you have to start building it out. And it becomes like, it's a tragedy in the sense that you have to like take it out of your head and actually put it on paper, because it's often always not what you want it to be once you start first working on it. So at what point did you, building on Bubble yourself, tell yourself this is good enough to go to investors and raise money and take that next step?
Yeah. I mean, I was really lucky that I had a group of other founders around me, because I would have never gone out and raised with what I had. It was really like other people being like, hey, Kelsey, you need to go take a swing, and like kind of giving me a push. Because at the time, like I'm not a designer, I'm not a developer. Like the app didn't work on mobile whatsoever. Couldn't figure out how to do any mobile responsiveness. And so to an extent, like, yeah, it was scrappy, and yes, it worked, and I got feedback on it, but it was still really rough. And so, you know, yes, people were using it, but it was really like the push from friends, from other founders who were like, you need to just go try. And if you can't raise money, no problem. But, you know, you're not doing yourself any services by not trying.
Awesome. Oh, cool. Very cool. So that worked out, obviously. And then you decided to hire Kelly. First of all, how did you find Kelly?
Through On Deck. So I did the On Deck Founders program, and know that there's a lot of talented no coders in the On Deck no code program. So we're connected through On Deck.
And why did you choose Kelly? What was it about her?
I chatted with maybe 10 bubble agencies. And when I chatted with Kelly, I was like, this person gets it. And this like project, I knew, like, yes, our Figma designs were like, made it all seem simple, but I knew from building it myself, I was like, I know there's going to be a lot of things that come up. And being like a kind of founder mindset myself, I was like, I want someone who can come in and problem solve. I don't want to handhold the entire thing. I want someone who can like kind of make conclusions or, make calls on how to build it when I'm not sitting on Zoom with them. And Kelly to me was like the person who could definitely do that. And yeah, she also was just like, seemed fun. So I was like, I think I'm gonna like working with this person, which is a bonus.
Awesome. Yeah, she's definitely fun.
Yes.
And okay, so you decide to hire Kelly, and then Kelly, we'll turn things over to you, and then we'll jump into the app here too. I think you have the, and this is something that happened to me often as a freelancer. I'm curious to get your opinion on this. Sometimes people, when you're freelancing, they come to you very similar to Kelly's situation, where they have, or Kelsey's situation. I knew I was going to mix up your names tonight. Where you have an app that already exists, whether it's like a template or whether it's something that you tried to build yourself. And Kelly, you decided to start from scratch. And I think that was a big point of discussion, whether to take what Kelsey had already built or to start from scratch yourself and build out the data structures and all the things that come. Why did you decide to start from scratch?
Well, it's funny. So I have been a designer for
so
years.
Ratchet.
No. It was not, actually, it really was a decision. So back in my design days, I used to get a lot of requests to just like tweak my website. I was a web designer. And I did that a couple of times and I was like, this is miserable. Like, it's just so awful to work in other people's site or app or whatever. It just is like, you spend so much time figuring out what's going on that it's just a waste of time, right? And what Kelsey had built was fine, but she was changing the structure of it. Like, she wasn't keeping it the way that it was, right? The data was going to be structured differently. The process of writing a take was totally different. And so I just was like, let's just start fresh. She did have data in there. And so that was a challenge. We had to like take that data and sort of meld it into the new structure and then import it and all of that. So we knew that that would be, a kind of a challenging part of the process, but it would come later and it would be less challenging than trying to take what she had with all that debt, right? And make it into what she wanted. So yeah, I just was like, let's just start over. And I think it was the right decision. Yeah. Yeah,
I've definitely, the main app that I'm working on right now is actually one where I didn't do that, where I took over another developer's work, and it took a long time to, if I could go back in time, I probably would have started over from scratch. It just, it's definitely.
Well, especially when, like, I remember the first bubble app that I ever built was a piece of crap. Like, it was just awful. I did everything wrong. And I feel like that's just true for everyone's first app. So like, why would we, start, not to say yours was a piece of crap, Kelsey, because it definitely wasn't, but like, I mean, you just don't know what you're doing, right? Yeah.
And everyone has their own ways of doing things that aren't necessarily wrong, but just different styles of development for sure. Okay, so let's, if you're good to go, Kelly, why don't we dive in and look at the guts of this thing. It sounds nice saying that, but that's what it is, I guess.
So we, just a note, we started this project in early December. It was right after they released the new responsive engine. And I had just been like in it and I was super excited about it. And so I was like, let's just do it in the new responsive engine. So everything in here is in the new engine.
Very cool.
Which meant I was kind of learning as I went in a way, but I also learned it really quickly.
Bubble was also fixing it too as you were developing, right? So that was definitely a challenge.
Yeah. And like 2 days after we launched, they added conditional minimum maximum widths and all these other things. And I was like, I was dying for that through this whole I spent hours figuring out how to like make things responsive. And then they just fixed it 2 days after we launched.
So I'm sure that we could go and look at many different parts of this, but I wanted to, just for the sake of time and focusing on a few different things, what was the most what was the most challenging aspect of this app?
So I'm gonna preface this with the LinkedIn login was just terrible, and I need everyone to scream at LinkedIn as much as you can about how horrible their API is. So that was really difficult. And I will plug Pro No Coders because those guys just like helped me. I could not have set that up without Cameron from Pro No Coders. So check them out. But aside from that graph, the calculations that went into the graph on the profile page was so difficult. And this was like a big sort of learning experience for me as a freelancer working with a client, because Kelsey was like, here's what we want the graph to be. And I was like, okay, that's my job. And so I was trying to figure out all this math, and it's like not simple math. It's like how to weight things and all of this. And at some point, I mean, I had spent quite a while trying to figure out like how to get these numbers to make sense. And I finally came to Kelsey and I was like, I just need to talk through this. And we realized like, you need like a math person to do this, like to tell you what the formula should be. I could figure out how to get the numbers to add or divide or whatever, but I am not a data scientist, you know? And so I should have just from day one said like, we need to engage someone who can like say how these numbers should.
Is that what you ended up doing?
Well, Kelsey's boyfriend is in fact a data scientist. So what's so funny is we had someone right there and I just hadn't said I need that, you know, really dumb. So that was the hardest thing, getting those calculations. And also,
and so did you do the one of the things that's often challenging in Bubble, or can be, is doing heavy calculations. Did you do those inside of Bubble, or did you do that outside and bring the data in?
Yeah, I didn't actually know you could like, there's plugins for this and there's like, I just didn't know. I was like, I guess I'll just do this natively. So this green string here is the backend workflow for the calculations, and it's a daisy chain recursive workflow. So each step is recursive, and then the whole thing is daisy chained, and then it starts over again. Well, it only starts over again if you're doing multiple take calculations. So essentially, once you hit submit on the take, it starts step 2, and it runs all this stuff, and then it goes on to step 2. So the whole thing takes like a minute total to calculate. Do you want to see anything specific about that process? Or?
Well, I was trying to tie in. So there's some questions, like there are quite a few technical questions in Slido that I was, as you were telling me that, I was searching through the numbers, through the questions, to seeing if I could find one that would tie in nicely to what you were talking about. I haven't found one yet, but so it's.
I will say, if I can just sort of frame it a little bit. Basically, in the data structure, I had to create a base calculation that was like all the base numbers, this take numbers. Every take has a set of numbers, right? So this is what all the calculations are based on, this data type. And then with, after that, then it calculates all these other things, some categories, some competencies, some trait, like all these other sums that then feed into the graph. So you basically have like kind of 3 steps: create the take numbers, then create all these things, then get everything on the page.
Got it. So that happens in the back end, like the creation of those different rows there.
Yep. That's what that back end workflow is. And then on the page itself, it's loading a bunch of custom states with all those numbers.
Okay. So that was one of the questions, was about the flow of like custom states in your app versus saving data to the database. And I don't know if you have any insights there in terms of like tough decisions you had to make about that, or yeah.
Yeah. So on the write a take flow, that's this page, right, where you're filling out the take. The question was kind of like, well, when do we actually create the take? Right? Do you create it on the first step or on the last step? If you create it on the last step, you got to keep everything in custom states through the whole page, right? If you create it on the first step, then it's going to show up on the person's profile immediately, right? Like while someone's looking at it, it might show up. So we had to create like a, in our data on the take, there's like a submitted, you know, it's a simple yes, no field, right? Whether it's been submitted or not. So once it's been submitted, once this is changed to yes, which is on the last step, that's when everything calculates. That's when it can show up on the profile and all of that. So yeah, so we basically on that page, you can see, here's the workflow. So first of all, everything on this page is in steps. Oops, did not mean to do that. So steps 1 through 9, right? These are each of the steps, step 1, right? Step 2, et cetera. So each of these is there's a custom state for like current step, right? So that's a visibility conditional for each one of these. You can see when current step is 2, this is visible, right? So that's kind of how that works. But you also wanted them to be able to go back, which made it complicated, right? Because we can't just add a number to the step, right? And then we had this like guy up here that like, I don't know if you remember that happening, but I can't go through it now. If you want it to show what step you're on and what step you've completed. So these are like, if the current step is 6, it's this color. If the step completed, which is another custom state, is more than or equal to this number, then it's a different color. But you know, so anyhow, so the workflow on this, step 1 creates the take, right? That creates the take. And then you're setting states with all the data. So the data is in custom states on the page throughout that whole process, right? But it's also being added to the database at each step. So this is going to, so also self takes, skip the first step. So if it's your own take, you start on step 2.
Because that take's already created, I imagine, at user sign up, maybe?
No, it's simply because the first step is where did you work with this person? How long have you worked with this? You know, that's like, it's myself, right? So I don't need step 1. Step 2 is where you start with the sort of like assessing yourself. Right. So for a self take, you're creating it, right? Only when it's the take subject is the current user. But then you're setting states, you're making changes to the take, you're, you know, basically updating the take. So you could get halfway through the take and quit, and the take still exists in the database. It's half done. What we didn't do, and this was sort of like we didn't add quite yet a feature to be able to edit a take. So I know that's sort of coming, but for this release, we were like, we just got to get it done. So we have all those like half finished takes in the database that at some point will be editable.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the system that you'll have to do a bit of work here, but it also seems like it shouldn't be too bad to add that feature in. I think.
Yeah, I don't think so.
We have a few questions about Algolia. So what was that like?
Yeah, Algolia was another thing that pro no coders really, really helped with. So Bubble has a, I don't want to reveal anything in here. Bubble has a built-in feature that is like an integration, a built-in integration with Algolia. You have to turn it on and you have to be at like the pro level. You can't get it on the free account or the first account. It's like the second level or whatever. And once you turn that on, it's very simple.
Sorry, I should have asked this first, but could you give like a quick 2-second definition of like what is Algolia?
Algolia is a system for searching,
right.
you know, anything, right? It's used all over the internet. it basically, you can like create different weights for different fields on a data type. So let's say you want to search for a person and you want to type in the name Kelsey, right? It can search for her name, her email address. It can search for other people's, like maybe other people have some relation to her. It could find that, right? So it allows you to weight which field is important, not important, et cetera. We actually didn't get into all of that stuff. It also lets you search as you're typing, right?
And it's like lightning fast too.
Super fast, right? It syncs with an external database. So all your data is fed into Algolia and then it syncs. It's like, is it
yeah, well, they have
it's
like
not syncing, but it's like, yeah.
Well, they have I think, I'm no Algolia expert, but they have a special way of like indexing everything in their own database, and that's their kind of technology for making everything work super fast, right? So
yeah,
but,
it's
and
very,
that's
very
also
fast.
what I've heard is one of the challenging things. You can kind of see this in the bubble interface, because I think the data sync is in the privacy section, isn't it? Or there, that's part of it there.
Yeah.
And
so here, it's right here.
Right. So re-indexing in Algolia.
Mm-hmm.
And so you did use the native bubble integration for this?
So, yeah. So at first I didn't, and I was trying to set it up and it was so hard. And I don't actually think it's that hard. It was just the first time I was doing it, you know, and it's a new, you know, integration that I just hadn't done before. And it was very tricky, even with like I had help and it was still tricky. And so I finally messaged Kelsey and I was like, do you want to just upgrade? Like, are you going to upgrade anyway? Should I be spending time on this? And she was like, just upgrade it, you know? And so we upgraded and we got the sort of built-in thing. So we don't even use the plugin. In fact, yeah, I have the plugin in here. We don't need it. You can delete that, Kelsey. But do you want me to show you how it like looks in the?
Yeah, that'd be great. Actually, I'm really curious to see.
Search. So search box. Okay, so let's see. No. Hold on. It's actually in a reusable, isn't it? Search results. Okay, so here we go. Why is everything? Oh, we had to do this weird thing here. Yeah, it was appearing strange. Okay, so the data source, this is a repeating group, and the data source, you just type in Algolia search for users, and then you're filtering it by deprecated. Yeah, that was a whole other thing that I could explain. But basically, we just want to make sure people had like a full name, and that's who it's searching for. Some other ones have some other searches, and I'm not sure where they are in the app, are a little bit more intense than that, but there it is.
Right. And so that's kind of, I remember playing around with this a long time ago. And you can't actually put constraints. You would want to put a constraint on this search if you could, right, to the Algolia database, but you have to filter the result that comes back from Algolia.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's right. Yeah. Yeah, because they just have everything in their database, and you can set up filters on their end, but it does something funny with the integration. So like if you were building on like Webflow or something like that, you might be able to do that. But like Bubble's integration is new. I'm pretty sure it's pretty new. And so there's some limitations on it. I didn't find it to be anything problematic for us.
One thing that, and I hope I'm okay to ask this, but one thing that I've heard about Algolia is that it can get expensive. Like, are you guys like have you noticed that at all, or is it, or do they have a generous treatment, or?
Yeah, so we have a safeguard on that. On the profile page, this field, the search field, so it will just search as you type, right? Like just like Bubble's doing right now, right? It's just filtering the results, right? But we didn't want it to do that because that each letter counts as a search in Algolia, every single letter. And at like 1,000 searches per month, it starts charging you some amount, right? So you're going to get that in the first day. Like they're going to start charging you immediately. So what we did instead is we did not set Algolia's the search on this box. Once you type something into this input field and you press enter or whatever, it's going to set a state. And then it's searching for that term. that's in that state. Does that make
Got it.
sense? So it only does the search when you press enter.
Right.
And that's how we kind of got around that.
John is asking, there's some questions about privacy rules as they relate to Algolia. And then John is asking if the primary reason is to use it is for speed. When I've messed around with it in the past, it's certainly been for that reason. But what about you?
Yeah, that's a Kelsey question, actually, because Kelsey just told me to use it. And I was like, okay. So I'm curious. I actually don't remember why you wanted to use Algolia.
I had played around with search in Bubble, and it was kind of difficult to search multiple fields within a database. So it was hard to search both like name, like first name, last name, and company, because we were storing all of those in kind of like different data types or different fields. And so Algolia I had used in a previous startup, and it was just like so much faster and easier and smarter. And so, yeah, had worked with it before and just found it to be really a great tool.
Yep.
And you had mentioned that inside of Algolia, their technology just automatically indexes things where I think what is it called, fuzzy search, where you can search for multiple fields like you were talking about. You didn't have to set anything up with this integration to do that?
No, so the downside is that it searches every field.
Right.
So one of the things that I was like, when you finish a project and you're like, oh, I wish I could have, was like to really firm up how it searches in Algolia, because you can see what did I search for earlier? Did I search for Candor? And it pulled up stuff that like, no, it wasn't that. It was some other term, and it pulled up stuff that had nothing to do with that term. Yeah, it was this, Kelly. Yeah, I searched for myself, and Troy comes up. Troy's my friend. I think I'm probably in his like, who told you about Candor field? Oh, it's in the bio?
It's like, I love testing things for Kelly. Because I saw this too, and I was like, Troy, yes.
Oh, that's really good. He's my buddy. Yeah, that's really funny. So it's searching every field, and I kind of want to set it so it wouldn't search certain fields. This makes sense. You would want it to search probably the description field, maybe, or you'd want to weight it lower, right?
Yeah. Or like have a way of displaying that in the search results. That's like, sometimes you see like Kelly highlighted in the description or something like that in there.
Yeah.
And there's a few questions about privacy rules as they relate to Algolia. I hate to put you on the spot with privacy rules.
Yeah, God, you guys, this was like, okay, what is the specific question about privacy rules?
Let me go find it. It was, let's see. Algolia is not possible to put privacy rules on, I think. How do you handle that?
Right. Well, I mean, I have privacy rules set on the data itself. So I think you shouldn't have any problems with that, right? Well, because what would be the issue? What would you be trying to hide?
I'm not sure. I mean, like you're filtering the data as it comes back, which happens client side. I'm not, it's just an area I've never ventured to, but I guess, I don't know.
Yeah. So privacy rules were really important on this because we don't want people to be able to see who wrote a take for them, right? That's really important that the author of a take is hidden. So, so we had pretty strict privacy rules set up already. And I'm not sure I even considered how Algolia might need more privacy.
I've got a few tips here one from Tess. This is a bubble hack, I think, to search for 3 fields at the same time. Create a field called search index that concatenates all 3 fields.
That's really smart.
Really cool. Yeah. Evan Bridge is asking about use of acronyms to name elements. So your naming conventions, Kelly, I noticed that too as you were going through the app. You seem to be much more than I am myself.
It's like my favorite thing in the world. Yeah. So like, I have a list of naming conventions. PU, actually I changed PU to MD for modal. RU is reusable, GR for group. And I really did that because you cannot make the elements tree any wider. And I just couldn't see, group is a long word, you know what I mean? So group is GR, FG is floating group. Group focus is GRFOC. That one's kind of long. Yeah. So.
Nice. Awesome. Okay. I think like, is there anything else in particular? Okay, here's a question for you actually. And maybe you've already answered this, but if you have,
sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to say also in naming, this is one thing that I have really worked hard on is naming things. So, you know, your workflows are alphabetical, right? They're alphabetical. So if I were to say, like, for example, group selector, coworkers takes, if I were to put coworkers takes first and then group selector, and then the next one was self take and then group selector, they're going to be separated from each other in your workflows. So I'm always naming things in a way that they'll stay together in my workflow page. And that's why I have a lot of, let's see, this is probably a better example, right? I take button next, right? Instead of saying button step 1 next, I'm going to say button next. So they'll all stay together. And then I put the step or the sort of distinguishing term in brackets, just so my eye can see it quicker. Step 4, step 5. So that's one.
What about the colors for each?
Yeah. So I have heard so many people say different things about color. For me, color was grouped something visually that either went together, like these are different things happening in these workflows, but this is one flow, right? And then you have the previous buttons, you know, are sort of like the action is the same, but the workflows are different. So I wanted them to just be grouped together visually. I almost never use folders, which I know a lot of people use folders so that they can, I don't even have any on this page. I just, because I have to open this up to get to it and I just forget it exists, right? So usually a color means you're trying to accomplish the same thing, right? So like I'm moving things up and down. Those are going to be all the same, right? I've checked a box. Yeah. I
think this is the most organized workflow folder I've seen before. So it's you should see mine.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when I'm building for someone else, I'm much more organized, you know, because like Kelsey's going to have to manage this. I'm not on a retainer to manage this, right? So I felt like it was really important to make sure she knew what was going on.
Awesome. So one last question. I'll check to see if there are any others that I missed here. But what would you say, Kelly, you were most proud of from a technical perspective in this app? And if you've already answered that with maybe the Algolia search, what's another area that you're most proud of? I'm
really proud that I made it out of the LinkedIn login alive. It was such a nightmare.
So is the trickiest thing there, like OAuth is tricky across the board, I think. But like, what about LinkedIn was so tricky? So, okay, here was the issue. And this was the issue of this app. You can create a user for someone else in Candor. So I can create Chad Dixon. I can make a user for you. And you have a user, like an actual user, right? Which means then Chad has to be able to log in via LinkedIn, but he hasn't he didn't make it. It's just, so getting basically when you create, what was it, Kelsey? When you create a new user,
it's like merging
you have to merge.
Users.
Yeah. So essentially I create a user for Chad. Then when Chad goes to log in through LinkedIn, it creates a second user for him. And I did not know it was going to do that until like 3 days before we launched it. So now Chad has 2 users, right? So then we had to merge those users, which you can't do in Bubble. So basically I had to migrate all of the stuff I created for him to his new user that he created and then delete that old user. But let's say I wrote a take for Chad. So Chad not only has his record, but he has a take connected to it. It's like numbers, all the calculations, all that stuff. So I have this big old workflow in here that's basically merging users. I don't know where it is now, but yeah, it's just a nightmare. Total. And I did not know. If I had known that, I would have structured the data totally differently. And I just, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a whole thing.
Yeah,
for sure. Question from Evan here for Kelsey. What's the next notable feature on the roadmap for Candor? I know that you'd mentioned editing takes, but what else are you guys working on?
Yeah, editing takes is a big one. After we launched, a lot of the user feedback was around ease of completing takes. So right now the take process is, a 6-step process where you kind of have to click through the whole thing to submit it. And a lot of users we chatted with were like, well, like, what if we could like break down the takes a little bit more? And so one way you do that is like, being able to actually like exit the take and not be submitted. Another way is like, actually, we're referring to it internally as modularizing takes. So making them like smaller and feeling like, answering one question is a take in itself versus answering kind of the 6-step process. So we're still kind of working through exactly what it looks like, but the general theme of like, how do you make it easier to submit a take?
Awesome. So cool. Well, we're at the top of the hour here, and I think we've gone through Kelly, is there anything else that jumps out at you that we missed that you think would be good to talk about here?
Yeah, let me see. I had some notes on this data structure math. Yeah, I think the main takeaway, if I could just like send this out to the universe, is like, if you're trying to create a profile for someone without them doing it, do not make that profile a user. Make it a profile, and just then they can create a user and tie it to the profile. It just don't create users for other people. That's my big takeaway. I wish I had known and never use LinkedIn.
Got me thinking about some stuff that I'm working on now.
I
Awesome.
mean,
Right.
it just made it tricky with the OAuth. I think was the hardest.
Well, I think like OAuth in particular in that case is probably, like it's tricky when you're not creating users for other people.
Yeah. I think the other thing is like, just ask for help. Like ask early, ask for help. I went on Twitter one night at like 2 a.m. and was like, help. And someone sent me pro no coders, and I joined that day. And I was like, I don't mean to like, plug them too much, but like, they're an incredible group of people who know Bubble like you would not believe. And they do daily office hours. And you could just go in and be like, help, and they help you. It's incredible. It's incredible about you. So go to Pro No Coders.
It's
just join it.
There's a question here. Does Kelly recommend becoming a paid member of No Coders? So resoundingly yes, I think is the answer to that question.
Resoundingly yes. Yep. Worth the money.
It's one thing that's cool though, and I think like, I don't know, I felt this way when I was freelancing and doing client work, is like I had a lot of imposter syndrome about like, can I actually build this thing? And then you get to a point, I think, where you like, it still happens all the time, even though I've been bubbling for a very long time, where you don't know how to build a feature and you start freaking out because you feel like you should be able to know how to build everything because someone's paying you to do it. But you get to a point, I think, where you realize like that's just part of the job. Like that's really what people are paying you to do, is to figure out how to solve those things that you don't know how to do. And so it's refreshing to hear, or to I think for me at least too, and I'm sure for many people here, to hear your struggles after the fact now that you've pushed this app live.
And I was afraid to tell Kelsey when I didn't know how to do something, and probably spent longer than I should have trying to figure it out. And then finally just coming
instead of asking for help, you mean? Like
instead of just telling her this is difficult. Like, so for example, so it's mobile friendly, right? And Felix had designed some stuff for mobile that was beautiful. And there was one tricky part of it that I just could not figure out. And I should have gone to him on like hour 2 and said, Felix, can we rethink this design. Instead, I just kept working on it because I was thinking, this is how they want it, and I have to do it that way, right? And I think probably Kelsey would have been happy to say like, hey, Felix, can you just like adjust that thing so it takes,
Yes.
30 minutes instead of 2 hours or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just interviewed a guy who has taught me a lot about UI UX. I'll be posting that video soon. But one of the things he said, having done this profession, I think he's been working professionally for like 20 years, and there's this constant tension between the design team and the development team. And when you were talking there, a story that he told me came to mind where he'll have, I think this happens quite frequently, where he'll go with it's always a nice looking design. It looks beautiful. And they'll take it to the developers, and the developer will be like, I could probably figure out how to do this, but it's going to take me like a week maybe because I just don't know how to do it. And then almost always the answer is like, well, don't take a week. Let's just redesign it and make something simpler.
Yep. This is my first time. So usually I'm the designer, right? And so this was my first time working with another designer, and the designs were so thoughtful and they were so thorough. They were like really, finished. Felix knows what he's doing. And so my assumption was like, they thought really hard about these decisions. Right. And I know that was true, but like also I didn't know Kelsey well enough to, or Felix well enough to know that they would be fine,
Right.
changing some stuff. So yeah, I think that going forward, I think that would be a question I would ask before I even started, is like, if something, what do you want me to do when I get to this point? Like, how firm are these designs?
Right. Awesome. Well, those are all the questions I have. Kelsey, anything, we talked about what's next for Candor, but anything else you want to share about the experience that we haven't covered yet?
I mean, I've just been so impressed with the no code community and kind of the power of no code tools throughout my founder journey. So yeah, really impressed with what you all do, and keep at it. It's awesome.
Very cool. All right. So we're recording this. I'm going to post the replay on my YouTube channel, and Kelly will be shouting about. Kelly, where can people find you on Twitter?
Oh, right. Yeah, I have a little, I'm on Twitter, wherever that is. I don't know where it is, you guys. I lost it. Okay.
Claus, I said so.
Claus, I said so. It's Claus, I said so. I'm
awesome.
Putting it in
and
the chat.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. So I hope you guys found this valuable. And I'm sure we'll do it again.
I will say there's a lot more questions in the Slido.
Oh,
I'm going to answer them. Yeah, I'm going to
ahead.
just type answers in there. And so if you guys want to see your answers, they're in Slido. Yeah, cool. Or I'm happy to stay on after the recording is done. We can. Sorry, I just made it awkward.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't you stop the recording?
Okay.
And we can just I'm happy to stay on too. I've got nowhere to be and just sitting at home right now. So I can hang out here like that. That's the formal fireside chat is over. This is like the after hours fireside chat. Yeah. If you guys got to go, you got to go. Feel free to turn your videos on, say hi. It'd be nice to see some faces. And then, yeah, I'll stop talking and just kind of.
And we'll do this again, I think, with some other apps. So hope we see you guys again. All right, I'm gonna stop recording. Bye everyone, but stick on if you want to. Okay.
Bye everybody.